Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, and this is another drum corps rant. Today we are going to talk about ranking. Last time we talked about slotting. Now we're going to talk about ranking, which has a little bit to do with slotting. There'll be some related information there. I don't know if you like these talks or not, but hey, I got time on my hand. It's summer. I'm a music educator. Every day is a Saturday until September. So I've been watching the forums. There's been some discussion about the ranking that people are seeing on Flow. And the question is, well, where do they get that from? What is that? Is that last year's numbers? It can't be last year's numbers because they're seeing weird placements. And, what is it? What's it derived from? Well, it's coming from DCI. DCI has created a ranking system that averages the last 3 shows. So you have to wait until a drum corps has at least 3 shows, and then there's an average of scores that gives them a rank. And as you'll note, the rank, as far as we can tell, may not necessarily line up with the reality of the relationship between these drum corps. Now, here's my issue with this. I don't have a problem with DCI's ranking at all. I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with them doing it. What it does do, though, is it exposes problems with the way, as I see it, this is my opinion, it exposes problems with the way that drum corps are scored through the course of the season. Now, I have to say, as I say all the time, drum corps, as with a lot of adjudication of arts adjudication, it's like the TV show, the comedy show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? And the tagline is where everything's made up and the points don't matter. And I believe that. Everything's made up and the points don't matter. I do believe that there is some criteria, which we talked about in the slotting video, which deals with content and achievement, that is very objective, but ultimately there's a lot of weight on very subjective matters in the adjudication of this activity, as well as many others. But like figure skating or something like that, you can have objective observation based on difficulty and achievement, content and achievement, and give an objective weight to it, and then still have this other artistic element, particularly related to flow and GE and messaging and whatnot, and have something that is worthy of some kind of adjudication. I just don't think we should get too bent out of shape over how things come out. And that's kind of how I feel as a drum corps fan, as someone who marched in drum corps. I felt that way back then. I feel the same way now. I don't put a lot of stock in the numbers. There's an argument about, like, say, 2019. Well, as a blue coat, I'm sympathetic to these other people that say, well, it really was a tie. In my book, it was a tie. The Blue Devils really is just a tie. In my feeling on that is I don't care. I don't care. I don't care how it comes out by 1/10 of a point and a 100th of a point or whatever. I just don't. The points don't matter. They really don't. I look at the achievement of the drum corps in terms of its content, how well they're doing it. And, if I enjoy the program, do I find enjoyment in it? If I find that it's so esoteric to be just a bunch of pretentious nonsense, I kind of check out, And I do get bummed when I see a lot of that kind of stuff going on. But even in those cases, if I see a lot of pretentious nonsense, and there is a lot of it out there, even with the blue coats, by the way, there's a lot of it out there. Even when there is that, I still can fall back on the content and the achievement, and I can say this is entertaining to watch. It's entertaining to see people doing things that are difficult and doing it well. That's what sports is about. That's what sports adjudication is about. People doing difficult things and doing it well. So we can always fall back on that, at least as far as the entertainment value goes. Now, this ranking thing. I don't have a problem with the ranking. I have a problem with the way that drum corps are adjudicated through the course of the season. I have big problems with this, and I'll get down to that. Let's, though, first go back to the way things used to be. Over 20 years ago, we used to have an event that happened before San Antonio. I think it was before. It happened in Indy. It was at the RCA Dome, and it was a regional event where everybody was together, and there's actually 2 shows. If you, in the previous season, were ranked 12 through 9, you had to perform in this first show. And you would perform there and get adjudicated at that show with everybody else that was ranked below that. And then if you ranked 12 through 9, you would then go on and have to do another show that night with the corps that were ranked from last year, 8 through 1. And then things would get mixed up again. And oftentimes what would happen is you might be 9 through 12 and have to go in that first show. You obviously, for us, we would win the Bluecoats, and that season I was there, we won that show. And then we went on to the next one, and then we placed higher than that. So we would, this relates to the slotting issue, right? This is one of the things that refutes slotting, is that from one season to the next, this is really where you would see a drum corps kind of kick it into a new gear, making major program decisions, and coming out way ahead. This is really where slotting was defeated, is you could see this thing happening. Slotting actually was in the setup for this event, that it was based on last year's scores. That's slotting. I mean, that is slotting. They were not looking at scores leading into the situation and then determining who would perform when. Now this is a pragmatic matter. You can't really do that because drum corps have to schedule their times in their travel based on data that is pre-existing. You can't just at the last minute say, hey, you're scheduled to be here at this time, but you know what? You don't need to be there because your scores say that you'll be at this other event. That's not, drum corps have to schedule their time ahead. And because they had to schedule their time ahead, the way to do that was to use the previous year's ranking to do that. And there's the reason for that. And now I don't think any shows are like that anymore. And I'm glad they're not like that anymore. Even now, the placement from the year before may have a little bit to do with some expectations in terms of lineup. That's true, but there's still some regional activities where the placement is decided based on current scores. When you get to Allentown, for example, there's some arbitrary breakup in who goes on what night, but the placement leading into that night does determine, or at least from a previous regional event, determines who goes on at what time. And then, of course, that leads up to finals where everything is determined based on ranking coming into finals, at least into quarterfinals. So back to the issue. Why do people not like this ranking system where you're adjudicating 3 consecutive, the most previous 3 consecutive scores for a particular corps gives them an average? That's what DCI is doing. That's what's showing up on Flow. I agree with that. I see no problem with that, and I don't care that the order seems a little muddled compared to what we probably know the real ranking is going to be on a head-to-head night. I don't have a problem with it because it is honest. It is an honest way to come up with a number. The problem is that corps are not getting the numbers they actually deserve on night 1. That's a fact. I mean, they are not improving that much. They just are not. I can say this with confidence because I know that a 75 on night 1 for a contending drum corps, 76 or something, let's be generous and call it a 78. A 78 for a contending drum corps on their premiere is not at all the same as what a performance that earns a 78 at finals or semifinals or quarterfinals, whatever we're calling it now. It does not equate to that performance in content and achievement and GE, all of it. It's not the same thing. It's not. And everyone knows that. We've all known that for a long time. These numbers are completely bogus and arbitrary. Everything is made up and the points don't matter. Why do the numbers move up the way that they do? We'd like to tell ourselves that they move up because the drum corps improve. And they do improve. The drum corps do improve. I don't think they improve nearly at the rate that we pretend that they do. Oh, I see all this dirt. There's a lot of dirt in the drum line. They'll get that fixed by finals night. You don't worry about it. I see a lot of dirt in the Blue Devils drum line. With all due respect, there's not a lot of dirt. in these premier performances from these groups. They sound amazing on night one. They look amazing on night one. Their design is amazing on night one. And they deserve something on the plus side of 90 on night one, if we're being honest about it. That's what they really deserve. The way I see it, throughout the history of drum corps, you pretty much get a 60-ish, in the 60s, for having a show that has a beginning, it has an end, and it does not fall apart. If you can have a performance that goes from point A to point Z without stopping and falling apart, without breaking up, you kind of get that 60s-ish sort of number. That's the way it is in I think all of the platforms. DCI, DCA, WGI, it doesn't matter where you're at. You're getting these kinds of figures or comparable sorts of numbers depending on the scale that they're using, just for having a show that does that. And that's not really what those numbers mean when you get to the end of the season, necessarily. They're a little bit different. Or I should say, at the very end, they kind of do mean the same thing. What doesn't make sense is everything on the plus side of it. This is all very devalued at the very beginning of the season, arbitrarily, so that the numbers have a place to go in the positive. I would be more comfortable seeing numbers on premiere night that for a contending drum corps is on the plus side of 90, probably up to a 94, 93, 94 for a premiere performance of a contending show. And then by the time you get to finals, looks more like a 95 to 97 kind of range, maybe a 98, right? Something that's getting a 98 at the end of the season should be pulling a 94 on the premiere night. I mean, that's true. And the numbers should go plus and minus, plus and minus, plus, 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 minus. Drum corps should lose value on a night as opposed to gain value. We all know this. We look at a drum corps performance and do we not say, oh, that was a rough run? Well, if it was a rough run from the last night, why did they just earn 2 more points? Why did that happen if it was rough in terms of performance, right? I have major problems with the arbitrary inflation of numbers through the course of the season. And that's why you don't like the model. If the model was operating on figures that were honest, then the model would be everybody's favorite. You would actually get a ranking that looked real and would probably line up with the way things really come out right away at the beginning of the season. Probably after the first 5 shows. You got to get a read maybe on those first couple of shows where things either get plus valued or devalued based on a second or third read. And this gets to why we adjudicate the way that we do right now. Judges and DCI want to have an enormous amount of room to make an opinion. It's a lot easier to just give value for nothing in the first several weeks of the season and use that opportunity of arbitrary inflation to determine where people really at, rather than coming out and saying and taking a risk and sticking your neck out and saying, you know what, on night one, that deserved a 90. But actually, by the end of the season, we're going to call it an 85. Judges don't want to be stuck doing something like that or being caught making some kind of egregious claim like that. But I personally have no problem with it. I would be fine with that, with giving honest evaluation on the first night that pretty much maintains through the season. You would see numbers bouncing back and forth. I think you would also see in that kind of a model, you would more likely see drum corps trading spaces in the contending categories and in the various tiers where they're at. There'd be a lot more movement, I think, going on if we gave more honest evaluation at the start of the season based on content achievement. Just my 2 cents on it. So that's where the ranking's coming from. I have no problem with it whatsoever. It makes an enormous amount of sense. I mean, look at the way rankings work everywhere else in life. If you look at like the adjudication of a class, you have a class, you have the very first assignment, and based on the very first assignment, there's a class ranking. It's honest, it's fair, it's true, it's based on things that have happened. it doesn't necessarily determine how it's all going to come out at the end of the entire marking period for that class. The ranking will be different, most likely, or not. It's hard to say. But it is honest, it is true, it is a whole lot better than saying the ranking is whatever they got last year, because that's got absolutely nothing to do with what's going on right now, based on major program decisions that have been made in the off season, as we discussed on the previous video. So anyway, there's my 2 cents on it, and yeah, I like the ranking system. I don't have a problem with it at all, none at all. I think it makes sense. I have a problem with the numbers that drum corps are getting right now. I mean, seriously, you get like 50 points for showing up and puking on the sideline. What's up with that? Makes no sense. Anyway, good luck with that. Enjoy your season.